It finally gave computers a new type of new face. But the issue is that it's a one-size-fits-all interface. AI was there as a catalyst for change in pretty much every industry, but also in the way that we interact with computers. Today, the thesis for Open Sesame is that eventually everyone is going to do most, if not all of their work using natural language, a sort of dynamic, adaptable user interface, which we call the LUI, the language user interface.
It just feels like you said, we've currently passed the Turing test. The old way of doing it doesn't make sense, right? So
we kind of want to give an alternative to the end user, like more of an AI-ified experience where we kind of learn from the way you work.
Instead of like trying to figure out your website, you could just like speak to the website. It is this notion of incantation, right? Using technology to incant something and opening something. Anthony, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show. I'm really excited for today's conversation, man. I know we've spoken a lot offline and want to dive in all things Open Sesame. Maybe a more personal question to start. I want to dive into Open Sesame, the round you guys just announced. But what got you into startups?
It's probably a mix of a couple of things. I still vividly remember when I was like quite young, just building stuff. I started building robots when I was probably 7, 8 years old. And I fell in love with the whole process of, hey, find a problem to solve and build a solution for it and just, I guess, show it to my parents. And so that whole process started off, I guess, my building journey. And then obviously being raised on Shark Tank and Dragon's Den and all that, it definitely helps. And I guess on the other hand, you have like my dad who runs his own little like small business, buying and selling steel. And so at the dinner table was a lot of conversation about business and negotiations and all that stuff. So that mix of building and business kind of made sense.
Yeah, it's a great story. I didn't know about your dad being an entrepreneur himself. This is your third startup now, right? If I understand, what startup would you count this as?
I'd probably count it as like my second.
Okay.
Yeah.
Give us more info on the first.
First one was this one-man show selling software to hospitals. Terrible business, to be quite honest with you. I don't envy anyone who's in the healthcare space. It's incredibly hard, especially in Quebec. But it did teach me a lot about the fundamentals of this, like selling to enterprises and selling to bigger organizations and being faced with the reality of what people were using on a day-to-day basis in terms of like software. And so I took some of those learnings and applied them to the company today.
Yeah. So I'm going to geek out a bit. So what was the software? And then when did you decide that it wasn't working?
Oh, it was like an EHR software company. Essentially, we were trying to compete against Epic in Quebec, because as of a couple of years ago, Quebec was doing all of their EHR stuff, like just all of their health records, just pen and paper. And obviously that causes a lot of like management issues and a lot of patients, they feel the effects of that just because either the administration is too slow to process their files or stuff like that. And so when I realized that, I was like, okay, like how hard is it to make an EHR realistically? Turns out the software isn't the issue. It's more like the sales process. And then probably, I don't know, 6 to 8 months later, news came out that the government of Quebec signed a like $3 billion deal with Epic Systems to do their EHR stuff. So I was like, okay, that's probably my cue to close the company down. And at the same time, I still had to finish my university. And yeah, kind of made sense.
Okay, it's cool. I didn't know you were doing that while still finishing your studies.
Pretty sadistic, yeah.
Small parentheses, but I'm familiar with that space just because in my old company, we had a customer in like a tech software company selling into the Quebec healthcare system. And I've had many conversations about Epic and how it's like they decide if they want to work with you or not.
Yeah, they're so big.
Yeah, they're like, okay, this what government, and okay, we'll take your order and we'll decide if we want to work with you.
I think it's such a weird company. It's based out of like the middle of nowhere. They have this huge campus, literally it looks like a college campus, and the whole product is written in some obscure coding language, and so you can't actually reverse engineer it, or I don't know. It's just these kind of like big companies with like big moats. Quite interesting to study.
Yeah, it was an interesting one. I was like, my understanding is that someone should come along and try and disrupt this thing. But
it's so hard.
Yeah, it's hard. Sorry, maybe for first start, were you still learning and still studying? Maybe not. And then, so how did you get the idea? I know you said you did mention shutting down your first company, but then how did that lead you to then starting Open Sesame?
So after that, I had applied to this incubator program in Toronto. And by pure coincidence, I got to reconnect with a guy I'd met probably a couple months earlier in Toronto. hint, hint, it's my co-founder, Jay. And so like I met Jay originally at a machine learning competition he was hosting. At the time we both had our own businesses. And so we're like, hey, I appreciate you as a person, but there's nothing much we can do there. And then when we both got into Next 36, the incubator, we were like, okay, let's try this thing out. And so he had experience in public schools, had experience in healthcare. And so we were like, both of these verticals care a lot about AI safety and hallucination detection. And so the first iteration of Open Sesame was just doing that, AI hallucination detection.
Interesting, yeah. And because I know we've been known each other for a little bit of time, and I remember seeing some of the first iterations, and I'm like, I'm not too sure what this company does. It wasn't super clear. So how's it been? Like, I want to maybe double click on your co-founder relationship, because I see you guys like being super tight and aligned. How, like, and you said you got to know each other at Next 36. So walk us through a little bit of that relationship.
Yeah. So the first day when we started working together, or like when we started to reconnect, he was working on some like ed tech Quizlet AI thing, which anyways, I won't get into ed tech, but similar to healthcare, it's not the greatest of verticals to go into. And so I told him, Jay, and he never forgets this, but like I told him, Jay, for such a smart person, why are you working on such a dumb startup? And I guess on the spot, he was like, this asshole, like, why are you telling me this? But then I guess that set the tone for the relationship. I was like, we don't have to take each other super seriously at all times. We can like chill outside of work. And then from then on, we were just like brainstorming, and we released our first like demo thing after 7 hours after locking ourselves in one of the meeting rooms in the incubator. And we're like, let's just go for it. We work really well together. We're both technical, yet we have like similar strengths and weaknesses. And so he's much more extroverted than I am. And so he is the life of the party. And so he's great for sales, great for all that stuff. And I'm much more focused on the product and strategy and all that. So it kind of complements.
Yeah, it's really cool, man. That's a really good story. And then, so you mentioned that first iteration of Open Sesame. Yeah. Actually, maybe like, how'd you come up with a name? What is it?
Yeah, I guess from day one, we wanted to give people a magical experience. And so, okay, magical experience, let's go through what that magical experience looked like in stories in the past. And I guess there was also the trend of seeing open AI, open router, open whatever. So like open what? Open Sesame. That kind of works. And so, yeah, that's the name stuck.
It's a cool name. It's a super cool name. I find it's, I don't know if it's like an age thing. It's like, there's notion of incantation, right? Of using, and then I guess it's a good on brand of, hey, using technology to incant something and opening something. So how did the current, we could talk about LUI. Sure. Louis, I don't know if that's the right way to call it, but how did you guys come up with this super cool idea of what you're building on now? Obviously, I'll let you explain it.
Yeah. So essentially, we started off with the hallucination stuff. We got some traction, couple of sales, couple of customers, whatever. We got the first check into the business. And then a month and a half after that, we were like, okay, let's expand this like 5 years down the line. Are we going to see more or less hallucinations? And then the obvious answer was less. And so why are you going to go after like this shrinking market? It doesn't really make sense. Plus hallucination detection, just by the nature of it, is like it's more of a research problem to solve, and we're not researchers, and I'm sure all the major AI labs are themselves trying to figure this stuff out because it's super important. And so as a pre-seed startup, like what can you really do in this market? And so when we realized that we had to pivot, we kind of looked back at our like individual sort of histories, and we realized a couple of things. Like one, when I was in my previous company and in Jay's previous company, both of those customers were kind of stuck with really old interfaces and really old sort of software paradigms that were stuck in like the 1990s. And at the same time, by pure coincidence, both of our fathers are in import-export businesses. And so we're like intimately aware of the challenges there, of the really bad software products that they were using. And I think any young person can relate to the whole, to an anecdote of, my parents always ask me like, hey, how do I do this? How do I do that? I'm lost in this software. I don't know what to do. And so you think back to first principles, and you have to realize that we're using the GUI and the graphical user interface. It's been the standard for the past like 40 years. And it's great. It finally gave computers a new face. Before the GUI, it was all like a terminal. You had to be like a software engineer to understand what you were doing. But finally, he had like windows that you can interact with in a more like human way. But the issue is that it's a one-size-fits-all interface. It doesn't really adapt to fit the user needs of each individual. And so by the nature of it, you have to leave a lot of people behind. And so when we realized that not only AI was there as a catalyst for change in pretty much every industry, but also in the way that we interact with computers, we realized that nobody else was working on this stuff. And we found it pretty interesting as like creative technologists ourselves. And so we just wanted to tackle it ourselves. And so now today, the thesis for Open Sesame is that eventually everyone is going to do most, if not all of their work using natural language. By natural language, I just mean like conversational sort of English or French or whatever language you use. And the way that has to happen, the only way that you can do all of your work using natural language is one, by turning a natural language prompts or queries into a chain of actions or chain of APIs, which is easier said than done. It's been something that we've been tackling for the past couple of months. And the second part is a sort of dynamic, adaptable user interface, which we call the LUI, the language user interface. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool. But obviously I'm biased because I love what you guys are doing. And it just feels, like you said, we've currently passed the Turing test. It came and went and no one noticed. And it's a good way to see it is the way we interact with programmers, like monkeys with thumbs, like typing on a keyboard. It's like, does it feel like the optimal way to do it, right? It's like you could just speak to it, right? There's a whole new way of doing it, right? Speaking into English and whatever language. And so you guys are like, feels like at the cusp of, hey, yes, the old way of doing it doesn't make sense, right? So if we take that concept and then say, okay, let's build a product around this, right? So maybe the booklet can explain how your product works, how who you sell into.
So our product is called Cell, and you can imagine Cell as an agent that comes in multiple different form factors. So one of the form factors is an embeddable widget that sits in the bottom middle of a software product or a service. And it connects into the underlying APIs of that product or any other integration that you might want. And it allows the end user of that product to do all of their work using natural language. So we offer that as an embeddable widget. We also offer that as a sort of employee-facing interface. And then we are going to release an SMS agent as well pretty soon. And yeah, same backend, but just different user interfaces to interact with the agent.
Can you maybe give how do your existing customers use your product? Give us one of their use cases.
So it depends on the customer. Usually on the enterprise side, we deal with a lot of insurance, managed financial services types of companies, even construction. On the enterprise side, it's a lot of the employee-facing interface because there's some compliance involved, and so you want to make sure that everyone's safe, that everyone's data is safe. And for example, for insurance, some of our customers are using us to essentially, when somebody calls in to get an insurance quote, for example, the human call agent on the other end right now has to communicate with 5 different software pages and do complex step-by-step processes, which, maybe for someone that's been working there for years is fine, but it still takes 30 minutes to ask 29 different questions to the customer. And nobody likes to call, right? Nobody enjoys that process. And so what we do is that we have our agent listen in on the call, understand the requirements, understand what the customer wants, and we fill in the blanks a lot of the time for the human call agent. And sometimes it takes calls from 30 minutes usually to down to 5 minutes. So we're saving people a lot of time, a lot of money naturally. And so that's how a lot of the enterprises use us. On the mid-market side, it's much more as the embedded widget, where we live on their product, and usually these are older types of software, not the most elegant out there, pretty complex. And so we want to give an alternative to the end user. If you're happy using the software the way it is, great. But if you want more of an AI-ified experience where we learn from the way you work, your habits and all that, and just make you work in a more natural way, then you have that other option as well.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So I didn't know that first use case where it's it listens to you, it's an assistant / agent or insert buzzword. That's really cool. So it's like an always on, helping out an agent, like a customer service agent in this case. Yeah. And then the second way is cool too, right? Where it's instead of trying to figure out on your website, you could just speak to the website.
Exactly.
Right? How have you architected the product in the back end? Are you like do you have to sit on top of a foundational model? Do you build your own?
Yeah. So we don't have enough money to make our own model right now. No, for each of these use cases, it's the same backend, which is the beauty of it. We don't have to maintain different SKUs for different customers. But yeah, we sit on top of a mixture of different models, depending on the use case, depending on the query. In some cases, we might prefer one model over another, depending on if it's a data related query, if it's more like general. Yeah.
Do you have to like end up building any of the data models for your customers? Because I imagine you're such a horizontal play, but then imagine the data in the back end pretty clunky. Is that an implementation challenge you face?
Sometimes, most of the time, our customers actually provide us with a lot of the context that we need to answer the questions correctly. Obviously, on our end, we do extra work in terms of if we know that it's an insurance customer, we'll try to feed it with more insurance data, or at least give the agent access to concepts about insurance, the lingo of it. And so, yeah, it's this like interesting challenge where we don't want to be too horizontal, because I think that kind of dilutes the marketing, dilutes a lot of the go-to-market and all of that. But at the same time, the tech is there to serve a lot of these customers.
Yeah, we could talk about your round and what you guys closed. Sure. And so it's, the pitches probably start with Industry X, figure it out, but then the market is like, the TAM is, why even talk about TAM? Like it's such a new way of interacting with computers that every company's going to need to work this way in some fashion.
Yeah. And hopefully they do adapt pretty soon.
Yeah, and you mentioned the challenges. Have you seen like on the technical side, because it makes me think a little bit the hallucination challenge, like the initial idea. Is that an issue at all? Like in terms of if you have the customers feeding you all this data, and then you have to make sure that the response is adequate, right? Especially if it's a customer facing.
Yeah, a lot of the challenges there come from a lot of the documentation that we get from their APIs. So oftentimes customers just don't have really clean, we call them open API specs. Essentially, it's a list of their endpoints. It's not the most detailed, or the descriptions aren't that rich. And so it's, it's a big challenge because the agent is going to be only as good as the data that it's given. And so we have to do an extra job of getting the best descriptions, the best data that we can from our customers without having them do too much work. And at the same time, you want to, since our goal is to make sure that you do all of your work using natural language, it's not good enough to only be good enough to call a single API. For example, I would want that any action that I give, any query, would prompt not only a single API, but a chain of APIs, maybe like a workflow. And naturally, like a Chinese telephone, if you start giving bad data to the first, then the second agent has worse and worse data, and eventually it's mumbo jumbo. You don't get a good answer at the end. We're improving that day to day, and that's the challenge of AI.
No, I'm not going to go into the whole AI thing. I think every podcast covers like the AI, what's going on. Maybe I'll keep a question for that on the end. And so you guys were part of A16Z Speedrun. Congrats. But like, how was that program? I know Jay's been super passionate to share all the good things and some really, so you should follow Jay on social media.
Yes.
But curious to hear you. What's been the value for your company, your startup?
Oh, it's insane. I think it opened our eyes to what the best teams out there, how they performed and what they did. I still remember, and Jay and I always talk about this, but like on the first day of Speedrun, it was in LA, and the first onboarding week was done at the old Snapchat office. And so I forgot who it was, but one of the Speedrun members came on stage and they're like, okay, guys, this is where Snapchat announced their IPO. We expect the same from you guys. You're like, oh shit, okay. No pressure at all. And then you started with intros, and everyone like, okay, who went to Stanford? It's like 2/3 of the class raised their hands. Like, Stanford, MIT, Harvard. And then Jay and I looked at each other. We're like, shoot, like I went to McGill, and then Jay went to UFT, and those aren't by any means like bad universities, but maybe they're not target schools for all of the Silicon Valley VCs and all that. And then obviously you had people that some guy was like a fighter pilot for 10 years, and then he got bored out of it, and he was like, okay, let me just join Anduril and XAI to lead their AI initiatives. We're kids here. I'm 23, Jay's 24, and then we're dealing with this guy. We're dealing with some Olympian squash player or a guy that raced with some current F1 drivers in Formula 3. Wow, okay. That's crazy. And so the first week was a lot of that, but then come week 2, and you start to realize like, these are just human beings as well. This perspective of you're not as good as those guys because they went to X university or they worked at Y job is wrong. Everyone is just a human being. Everyone in the program was accepted for a reason. And then the way that people worked as well was that's the standard. You come to the office at, call it like 8:30, around that time. And then you leave when the office closes at 8 p.m. And yeah, that's how the best teams perform. And if you're not up to that standard, then you shouldn't be in this industry. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun as well.
Yeah. If you wanted something easy,
nothing's easy in life, right?
Yeah. No, cool. Hearing you, it's super interesting, especially with my job. It's like thinking about how do you put ambitious teams together, but also demystifying it. It's like showing what excellence, what high performance looks like, and also, well, if that person's doing it right, like you're the same, in the same exoskeleton as I can do this too.
No difference. Yeah.
That's it. So it's this notion of talent density too, just putting people together. It creates this notion of, hey, companionship, competition.
Yeah. No, it was this really interesting mix where like obviously we're all like competitors at our heart, but like none of us were actually competing against each other in the marketplace. And so if we needed any help with anything, like there was always someone that was really spiky at something in particular that we could talk to. And by spikiness, I just mean someone that's top 1% in the world at something in particular that you wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Yeah, no, totally. So I think as an investor, it's like you want to find people that, again, have that one spiky trait and the weaknesses don't really matter as much. Maybe talk to us about the round you guys just announced. Congrats. What are you going to do the money with? When can I invest?
So we recently closed our seed round. Total round size was 7.2 million, which is crazy to even say out loud. And it was led by Radical, which is the first full circle moment for me. Just personally, the folks at Radical were some of the folks that started Mila and Vector and all these AI labs in Canada. And the way that I got into AI in the first place was by attending these little seminars given by Yoshua Bengio all those years ago at Mila. And you're like, wow, okay, who would have thought? I don't know. And we've known the Radical guys for quite a while now and pretty impressed with their portfolio. And also, like, it does help that the CEO of Cohere, Aiden Gomez, who also was invested by Radical, came in as an angel. And so we felt in good hands that we would give them the lead for the seed. Yeah.
Nice. And you also had Speedrun participate too, right?
Correct. They came in again for the seed round.
Yeah, congrats, man. Very cool. Very well done. There's not that many Canadian companies that are that raise that amount for seed with arguably the best VC as well with Andreessen, and Radical, I think, is the best, maybe Canadian, one of the best Canadian. What are you going to do with the money? What are you spending on?
We'll go to Monaco and enjoy it. No. I think top priority for us is definitely hiring. We don't want to hire too big of a team too early, but we want to make sure that whoever we hire, we're able to give a very good salary. I don't know why, but there seems to be this trend in Canada where you kind of want to cheap out on all of your salaries. And the perspective that I give is that an A player is always going to run circles around a B player. And so you want to compensate your A players like really well because they'll be hustlers, they'll work a lot, and they'll pay back in dividends. Plus, Shred's great. You get like 35% of all R&D costs back from the government. It's a win-win situation. So yeah, hiring is definitely the biggest one. I think right now the focus is getting to product market fit. Obviously, it's this mystical thing. All founders want to get there. And then once we get there, then we want to scale aggressively and take over that market. We want to have that cash reserve in case that, like, when that happens. And at the same time, like, if you want to learn from history, you want to make sure that you have enough money in the bank to sustain if the bubble pops or anything like that happens.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So it's a good war chest for sure.
You want to make sure.
Yeah, we could talk about the AI bubble if there's one or not. By the time release this episode, maybe it would have popped.
Who knows? Literally, who knows?
Yeah, no, it's really cool. Yeah, so I imagine like tons of experiments on the go-to-market side, continuing to work on the product. I know it's really interesting what you guys are doing. I want to say, I know you actually, maybe a personal question. Is anything keeping you up at night right now? It seems like everything's going in the right direction, but what's the CEO's kind of like? There's no one watching, so
yeah. I mean, it really just is. Let's get to this repeatable sales cycle. We could be talking day and night about what we think in theory would be a good wedge or a good customer or whatever, but let's get down to the facts. Okay, who wants this product? How easy is it for us to sell to these guys? And yeah, the metrics, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Nectar, is that once you raise your seed, you essentially have 12 to 18 months to raise your Series A. By then, you need to get to 4 to 5 million ARR. And so like you have to scale quite aggressively and get to that inflection point. And so, yeah, it is comforting in a way that I don't have to think about runway as much. But it's this like huge added pressure of, hey, like you were trusted with this money. I don't take that lightly at all. You're expected to perform. And so perform not like in 5 years, perform now. And so you try to do everything you can to get to that next milestone as quickly as possible.
Yeah, the loneliness of the CEO, right? What you're describing, it's hard. It's like
Yeah.
you have your responsibility and shit's gonna hit the fan multiple times a day. So it's, hey, brave face. I definitely hear you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like just a storytelling perspective. It's like you got such a great story to tell, right? Like this, there's a nascent market, untapped potential. So many companies trying to figure out how to do it, and it's no, there's this better way.
Yeah, it was funny to see Naval Ravikant's tweet on being like the UI is pre-AI, which is I would probably correct it to say like the GUI is pre-AI, but it was just like that's funny. I don't know.
Should be on the homepage of you. Yeah. We spoke about this tweet, and I'm like, oh my god, this is like open sesame.
I got quite a few DMs after that, just being like, oh, you were right. Okay.
Yeah, super cool, man. Super exciting. What's next in the horizon, like for you guys? You mentioned like obviously hiring and growth and everything, but what can we expect to see?
Yeah, so we're looking to hire 1 or 2 additional engineers into the team. The sooner, the better. Everyone's in person 5 days a week at the office. We'll probably have a more formal announcement. We're recording this in December. We'll probably have a more formal announcement of the fundraise in January, should be. Beyond that, I'm personally very excited about our SMS, like text agent product. I think I'm more excited about that one than the 2 others, to be quite frank. I think text messaging is such an interesting mode of communication. We've all converged into iMessage or whatever, and it feels very natural to us. But it feels like the industry is still stuck in early 2000s, like type yes to confirm, very old like marketing text messaging. And there really aren't that many people tackling like AI for text messaging and the way that we want to do it. You have a couple of companies, like I think Poke is the main one. That got me really interested in that space. I think what they're doing is quite interesting. It feels very human compared to every other sort of chatbot that I've used. But yeah, I'm excited to see, what the couple of pilot customers that we have for the text agent, how they resonate with that product and if they like it or not.
I would be remiss to not ask at least one of these dumb AI questions. Outside of what you guys are doing, what are you most interested about in the space right now? It doesn't need to be AI, but I'm curious about obviously in tech that you live and breathe it.
Probably robotics. I think given my past, like I keep a pretty close eye on all the stuff happening in robotics. I think what the folks at Figure are doing is pretty cool. Clone is another one that's this weird exoskeleton type of thing. Like they were like trying to recreate like a synthetic human, which is creepy, but really interesting at the same time. What's the other company called? Like Happy Robot or something? Like you have so many of these humanoid robots coming along. Obviously like Tesla's take on robotics as well is quite interesting, but it feels like we're getting close to some kind of ChatGPT moment there. Oh my God, the Neo as well, they can now purchase for like $500 a month or so. There's so much happening in that space. Now, time will tell how quickly humans will adopt these humanoid robots. I don't think the tech is there yet. It feels still very like robotic is probably the right word there. But I feel like we're getting close. I feel like we're getting pretty close to something impactful in the next year or 2, probably.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a good timeline. It feels like aggressive. I feel like we're maybe a little bit further away, but yeah, I think.
Yeah, you'll have your adoption wave as well. Like early adopters and stuff like are gonna try V1, and then it will probably be very quick, creepy for the vast majority of people. But then V2, V3 comes out. It's whoa, like this is genuinely useful. It not only cleans my dishes, it also folds my laundry. Whoa. I'm very excited for that stuff as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it cleaning my house as well. Dude, I could bug you for hours. Okay, so you're like round this close. People want to like keep in touch and learn and follow the journey. Yeah. We mentioned you're a social media superstar with Jay, but what's the best way to keep in touch?
Yeah, we post quite a bit on Twitter. So my Twitter handles is Anthony Azrak. Not sure what Jay's is. Jay Mansukani probably. We also have an Open Sesame Dev Twitter account. We have LinkedIn as well. You can go on our website, opensesame.dev. And yeah, just hit us up anytime. Happy to chat with interesting people.
Thanks for the chat today, man.
Of course. Thanks, Hector. Yeah.